All right. Hello and welcome to the Addicts Anonymous podcast. I'm your host, Jim R. Today is episode 47, and we're going to be interviewing Steve Z. How are you doing today, Steve?
I'm doing this fine, thank you. How you doing?
I'm doing well, sir. So let's dive in. Tell me a little bit about growing up in your childhood.
Well, for the most part, my childhood was, what I say, probably semi-normal. I had a very controlling and manipulative mother. She kind of wore the pants in the family. And not to say that my dad wasn't a good man, but my mom was very, very controlling, manipulated everything.
How did she manipulate?
Well, like when I was growing up, I was led to believe basically the only thing I was going to be able to do with my life was something mediocre. I'd always mention, wanting to be a something in the healthcare field, either a nurse or a doctor, something along that line. And I was always told, well, you can't do that. You're not going to be able to do that. Said, you're gonna go to school, you're gonna graduate high school, and you're gonna get a job, factory job, something like that, and just make a living for yourself. And she, now that I look back on it, she was emotionally and mentally abusive person. Um, she led me to believe basically I was going to be mediocre, just middle of the road. From the time I can, as far back as I can remember, you know, um, I was told that this is, middle of the road is going to be the best you can do. And so I grew up with this thought um, all my life. And then, but now, when I got into adulthood, my mom was also abusing benzodiazepines. She was she popped a lot of Valiums and Ativan and stuff of that nature. And I didn't realize it at that time because I was too young to know anything about that. But as I got older, the truth came out about it. And I done mediocre in school. My I was bullied a lot. I was a Hispanic male that was overweight, and at that time in Alabama, there wasn't too many Hispanic people around. I think me and my family was about it. And so I was always too brown to be white, too white to be brown, and so the kids never could kind of figure out where I was supposed to fit in. And so it was a constant struggle every day in school, and even in summer vacation I struggled with being bullied constantly, morning, noon, and night. And but I think the biggest thing, uh, as far as my childhood goes, it happened when I was about 10 years old. I was sexually abused by my babysitter's boyfriend. I think that was kind of a turning point in my growing up. They had been drinking. She was babysitting me that night for my folks, and he came over. They both were been in my dad's liquor cabinet, and uh, so I was sexually abused by him on two different occasions.
So
When
the
I
the babysitter was there while he did it.
The babysitter was there. She even I guess for lack of a better word joined in, you know, the second time around. And this was somebody that I had adored like a sister because I didn't have a sister. I had two older brothers that were already out of the house and doing their own thing. And so I looked at her kind of like a sister. and we would go places together. And this is somebody that I would have trusted with my life. And when that happened, um, that word trust became a very, very big issue uh, at that point. From then on, that word trust really didn't exist in my vocabulary for many, many years after that. Um, and so I struggled with that. And, everybody was telling my mom, he needs to go into therapy, he needs to see a therapist and deal with this. And she refused.
Why were people saying that? Were you acting out? What kind of things were you doing?
I was starting to not do my schoolwork, acting out towards authority figures, um, acting out toward other students. Um, if you was a male, especially if you was a male authority figure, I didn't have nothing for you. You could tell me the sky was blue, and I'm gonna swear up and down it's purple. And so, we had several meetings with school officials, and they said, we think he, needs therapy, to deal with some of these issues. And my mom was that headstrong. No, this is something, we're gonna deal with at home. And by the way, my mom was one of those fire and brimstone Southern Baptist type. This is something that we're gonna deal with at home. We're gonna cast out this demon and yada 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 plus tax, and we're gonna continue alive. We don't need any therapists. We don't need nobody coming in and telling us what's what. We don't need any of that. We'll deal with this at home. And so I kept getting, in trouble. I was suspended several times from school. So I was taken out of the public school system um, when I was 14, and I was put in a private Christian uh, junior high. And there for a little bit, my grades went back up. I started doing a little better as far as with my behavior, and my emotional um state seemed to get a little better. But then again, after several months, I started down that slippery slope again, and I was getting in trouble. I was causing fights. I was causing disturbances. You know, I started stealing. You know, I was basically doing anything to be different, anything that might have get me noticed. Now that I look back at it, I was looking for attention, whether it was negative or positive. But if this got me attention, if this trouble got me attention, that's what I'm going to do. Um, and so my teenage years was just a roller coaster, just, up and down, up and down. Um, I failed the ninth grade twice. I had to repeat it twice. Um, so the decision was made by my parents when I was 17 that I was going to take the GED, and I was going to go to some kind of vocational school, some kind of vocational training, pipe fitter or something along that nature. And so I passed my GED and tried the technical college route. It didn't work. Um, by this point, I had already started.
Why didn't that work?
Um, I the attempt. I just couldn't. I couldn't make it work. I had already started drinking by this point. Um, I was already staying out. 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and then try to be at class at 7:45. Um, I was falling asleep in classes. I was failing classes. Basically, it was just a miserable period. You know, um, my dad had paid out you know, substantial amount of money for that time for tuition and books and stuff of that nature. And he gave me several tries at it, and I remember one. This was the straw that broke the camel's back. I took the tuition check to the school, paid for it. A few days later, I figured out, well, if I drop now, I'll get 75% of the money back, and I don't have to tell my old man that I dropped out. And so I took tuition money, and that was the very first time that I ever experimented with any kind of mind altering substances. Um, was on that day that I got that money back, and but I had already been drinking, and because I figured out when I drank, I was like everybody else, whether I was white, brown, whatever color, however my looks was. If I was drinking, I fit in. Everybody liked me. I was the life of the party, so I fit in at that point. All I had to do was drink. That's all I had to do, and I could fit in with everybody. So that was basically my childhood, Jim. It was just kind of an up and down, you know. Some emotional things happened, and I started my drinking and substance abuse at about 17 years old. Is when I
How
when
much how much did your childhood play into your substance abuse?
I would probably say a large portion. Probably, if we had to put a percentage number on it, I'm probably going to say 75% of it, because I always had this feeling of not being enough, that I wasn't adequate. I dealt with that for years and years and years. That the way I was, I wasn't any good. I wasn't worth anything. And when I was using, I had all these friends. I had all these people that just loved to be around me, and so I was somebody. And all that stemmed from the the childhood that I grew up in, that where I was bullied, where I was picked on, where I was constantly put down and you know made fun of, and I'm not on this woe is me trip. I'm just being totally 100. This is the way it was, and as I got older, all these feelings that I thought that I had put aside, had put back, they were still there, and so it played a big tremendous role in my substance abuse.
Tell me about 17 and moving on forward once you started using.
Well, I started, the very first drink I ever had was at a Southern Baptist youth retreat. Believe it or not, our youth pastor, our youth pastor actually brought beer for the kids.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
that
no
was
good.
no, but we all thought he was just super cool. We
Well, of
thought he was
course.
the best. Here we are, 17 years old in a tent with a can of, Budweiser. Hey, that was just, you know, that was it. That was the best moment of my life. Thinking back, and that was the first drink I ever had, and I remember I had three that first night. That very first time I drank, I had three, and I remember the next morning I felt so sick that I said, "Oh my God, I'll never do that again. I will never touch another drop of alcohol as long as I live." And I didn't for a few days. Um, and so it started as a weekend thing. We all my buddies, which I thought were buddies, but we would get together, and we always had this one guy that was older than everybody that could, you know, make sure we had alcohol. And so it became a weekend thing. Um, and then when I got about the age of 18, I had got my first full-time employment, adult job is what I called it. I was working at a factory. And so it became weekends and maybe a day or two during the week, I drank. Uh, and then it became 3 or 4 days a week. And then next thing I know, I'm getting off work, start drinking then, and I quit drinking when it was time to go to work the next morning. And so this went on for, from the time I'm about 18 to I'm about, I don't know, 20 or so. And then I remembered this guy that always hung around us. He handed me a red capsule one day. He said, "Look, man," he said, "I want you to try this." He said, "I think you'll like it." And I said, "Well, what is it?" He said, "Well, let's try it, man." He said, "I promise you, you're going to feel fantastic. Take this couple beers, man, you're going to feel right on." So I did. I took one, and at that moment, I look back on it. At that moment, this light switch went on. When I popped that capsule, the switch went on, and I loved it. And it was actually codeine, what it was. I loved it. I loved the feeling. And so from that point, this guy taught me how to doctor shop. He taught me how to go to doctors and uh, do my thing.
And
And so
how old were you at this point?
I was about 20 at this point. And he taught me, what to say, like if I went to emergency room, what to say. And um,
How did you take the codeine, by pill?
at that time, I was taking it. I was taking it by pill, and it started out being one, maybe two at a time, and then I'm thinking, well, wow, if two makes me feel this way, what would three make me feel like? So I'll take three, and then four, and then five, and I was just taking them at that time, um, by mouth. And then when I got about 24, uh, I was introduced to hydrocodone for the very first time. And I was taught I was showed to crush it up, snort it. And so that, I started doing this, and I was doing the whole doctor shopping thing. I was going out of town. I was going, if I had to, go out of state. And at this time they didn't have all this, computer link stuff that they have now. You could go to several doctors in the same area, and at that time they wouldn't link together like they are now. And so I started, you know, the doctor shopping, then I started buying them, on the street. And but I always kept one thing in mind. I said, I don't have a problem. I'm not addicted. Why? Because a doctor is prescribing them to me. So if a doctor's prescribing them to me, I'm I don't have a problem, because by this time I already had a couple people saying, "Hey, you might need to look, at what you're doing." And I'm like, "Hey, do you see me living under a bridge? Do you see me holding up a sign saying we'll work for food? No, you do not."
These are I'm smiling because I was just reading about denial. I was just writing an article about it for us.
Yeah.
And part of that is comparing to other people, saying I'm not that bad. These are all signs and symptoms of this.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I was saying, how can y'all even say I got a problem? I go to work every day. I'm not, out here, "Hey, buddy, can you spare a dime?" I'm not doing none of that. I'm not going out here and hanging out and buying them from some guy in a van that's wearing a trench coat. I'm not doing that. You
You
know,
were in major denial.
major, I mean, plus, because I was getting them from a doctor, a legitimate doctor that went to medical school, that has a medical license. That's where I'm getting them from. So how dare you say that I have a problem? because I don't. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do in life. I have this extracurricular thing that I do, but I'm not causing anybody no problems. I'm not harming anybody. So please don't harp on me to try to put me in the class of, I may have an addiction problem. Don't you even dare try to put me in that class because I don't. Go look at an addict and then come back and look at me and see what you see. You won't see none of the similarities, buddy. I'm telling you. I'm as clean as the sheets, as a proof of sheets. So please don't try to tell me I'm an addict. And so this is the way I thought, and I thought this way for so many years. I thought, you know, I'm not. It's not causing me any problems yet. So my, it just escalated, and I was in denial. I was in the worst phase of denial that I could think of. There was no way I had a problem, and I thought that way for many years.
How was your employment?
Well,
Starting from when you were young, like when you were, well, so did you first, I guess I should ask, did you go to college?
I went to like I was telling you earlier, I went to technical college off and on for some time. I never did, graduate with any kind of degree in anything. I had got my GED, of course, and so I had went to work at a manufacturer here in town that made aluminum ladders. And so I went to work for them on a production line, and I was able to hold.
What were you doing on the production line? What was your job on the production line?
I would assemble the bottom end of the ladder. The plate that you put down on the ground when you put a ladder down on the ground.
Yeah, like the four. Yeah, under.
Yeah, that's what I've done. I assembled those, um, and I was able to actually move up. I became a shift supervisor on my line, um, and I actually held that job for 6 years. I worked. I had a couple of days that I'd miss for medical reasons, but I held that job for about 6 years, and then that's kind of when.
And I'm assuming your medical reasons were you got too hammered the night before.
Medical reasons,
quote unquote.
quote unquote, yes. But yeah, you're right. But and that's kind of when I lost that job. I was fired. I was terminated from that job.
For what?
Um, I had gotten hurt, hurt on the job, which would require you to go to a workman's comp doctor. And if you scream and yell loud enough, well, you know the rest of the story. So I got hurt, and I wasn't thinking clearly. And so they sent me to this clinic, and they hand me a cup, you know. And make a long story short, I failed the urinalysis. Um, and so I was terminated for that. And so basically, my employment record kind of took a major dive at that point. Um, I had to move back home. I had to move back in with my mom and dad, and um, I'd have one job for a couple months, then I'd go to work somewhere else for a couple months, and I just couldn't. I just couldn't hold down any kind of job because now that I look back, I wasn't physically, mentally, or emotionally capable of holding down a job because I, at that point, I didn't think of that it had anything to do with an addiction. anything, and my dad kind of wise to everything. And so when I was about 28 is when I went to my first uh, treatment program when I was 28. And by this time I'd already had about one, two, probably about 8 or 9 jobs. Um, I mean, it was so bad I couldn't even hold down a fast food job.
It
I
was
mean,
because of your addiction strictly.
because of my addiction, I couldn't hold down a fast food job.
Were you
I was,
doing, were you using during the day?
oh yeah, I was. By this point, it was around the clock. When I hit the floor in the morning, I had to have something to, before I could even eat breakfast.
What was the main thing you'd have?
Opiates,
So it's you,
codeine,
yeah.
uh, Percocets, you know, uh, opiates. I had to have something in my system 24 hours a day for me to be able to walk to the mailbox. I will never forget the first time that I ran out of something. I thought I was dying. I thought I got the worst case of the flu known to mankind. I didn't know anything about withdrawals. Withdrawals is something that happens to addicts. So I didn't know what was going on. All I know is I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't go to the bathroom. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I dang sure couldn't get up and go to work. Um, and so I lost that job. Well, I lost several jobs because of the withdrawal thing. And so it got to the point that, I had to have something in my system around the clock, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so it had became by this time I was, now that I look back, um, I was in major addiction and was still in denial of it. And it was this time that I went to my first treatment center. My dad had kind of, noticed some things going on. He had found some empty bottles in my room, and so I went at 28. I went to my very first uh, treatment program, 30-day program. I stayed the 30 days. I was in there. Yeah. Oh God, please help me. Yeah, oh yeah, that's me. That's me. Oh yeah, I need help. Thank you. I done the 90 and 90. I done got a sponsor. I got all the newcomer bumper stickers on my car. Let go, let God. One day, I mean, it's all over my car. I got every bumper sticker known to mankind that's got anything to do with recovery. At this time because I'm trying to get people off my back. I just need people to back up. And so I done all the things that was required of me. And I got a sponsor, and then me and my sponsor ended up using together one day, and you know, uh, I think the very first time I think I had like 100 days in, and I started using again uh, after it was on my 100th day. I started using again, and it was a pattern that would continue for many years. And then I moved down to Panama City, Florida when I was 33. And that's when everything really escalated. That's when everything really just skyrocketed. When I moved to Florida, that's when everything just went bad, from bad to really worse. When I moved to Florida, I started on heavier stuff when I moved to Florida. I had a, gentleman tell me, he said, "Hey, I know you like opiates, he said, I got something I want you to try." He said, "You snort it." I said, "Well, what is it?" He said, "Just try it." He said, "If you like opiates, you're going to love this." And so he cut me out a line. And I remember it was real brownish looking, and I'm like, "Well, what is this stuff?" I said, I kind of would like to know. Pure opiate, man. He said, "Pure opiate, just, you know." And so I did, I took a dollar bill, wrote it up, you know, and man, I remember 5 minutes later, I'm in heaven. I'm in the euphoria was off the charts. I was in total heaven. And I remember him looking at me. He said, "Here," he said, this first little bag, it's on the house. It's on me. You know, Here's my phone number. If you decide, you want a little something, something, give me a call. Well, as smart as I thought I was, I didn't know what I had just put in my system. I didn't know. He didn't tell me, and I really didn't start pushing the issue because it felt so great. I didn't push the issue what it was. And I remember when I found out what it was, I remember at first feeling this shame, this guilt, this oh my God, I can't believe I just done that.
Yeah.
I becoming what I swore I'd never become, and I'm becoming one of these people that I would point at in the street and said, "Oh my God, they need to get a job." I'm becoming that. And that was the very first time that I ever tried heroin. Very first time. And so this this started a pattern of um, I had got married, and it didn't last too long because I became emotionally and physically abusive. Um, our bills were not getting paid. I was taking her money, my money, any money that came in the house was going toward my addiction. Um, she had two kids from a previous marriage when we got married, and I loved these kids with all my heart. They were so wonderful, boy girl twins, and they were so wonderful. And but I ruined this marriage. I mean, she was a good lady. She was very good to me. My family loved her. Her family loved me. And but my drug addiction just, I became emotionally abusive, mentally abusive. And then there toward the last year that we were married, I became physically abusive. Um, they, I was pawning everything in the house. We didn't have a TV in the house. Um, I had lost two vehicles because I had pawned the title and then, couldn't get them back. Um, Bouncing from job to job to job. I hold a job a couple months here, 3 months there. I'd lose it and I'd use the same excuse, well, I got laid off, or my biggest excuse was I got hurt and they're not going to let me come back to work. And so after a short time, about 5 years, I think the marriage lasted almost five. Um, she called me one day because we were separated, and she said, "Look, I want a divorce. You need help." She said, "You desperately need to get you some help." And of course, I cried on the phone. Sweetheart, you're right. I'm ready to um, turn this thing around. If you just give me one more chance. And she said, "Look, you get you some help. You prove to me that you're trying to help yourself." She said, "We'll talk. We'll talk about it. But these are some things you're going to have to do first." And so, therefore, I entered my second treatment center. But I wanted to get my wife back. That's why I entered it. I wanted to get my wife back. It had nothing to do with I wanted to get myself clean and sober. It had nothing to do with that. I wanted to get my wife back. So if that's what it took, that's what I was going to do. So I entered my second treatment center, little small country hospital here in Alabama. This was a place you could wake up with a raccoon in the hallway or someplace like that. It was really country. And so it's so country that even rednecks would say, man, this is country. I mean, it was bad. And so I went there, and this was it was only I was there 20 days, and they recommended I go to a halfway house. And
So you were in rehab, and then they wanted to put you in a halfway house.
they wanted me to go to a halfway house. So they actually, my wife and I were still legally at that time. We were still married. We were just separated. So they talked to my wife. They got her to come up on family day, and this was one of the stipulations. You go to this halfway house, you stay for a little while, show me some stability, you know, and we'll talk. So I'm not, sweet, I got this. I'll go and stay here for a couple months, and I'm cool. So I went to this halfway house, and I had never been in anything like this before. I'd heard of it, but I'd never been in anything like this before. All of a sudden, I'm in this house with 15 other guys. I'm sharing a room with three other guys. Um, I'm hearing, we would have these group meetings, 2 or 3 times a week, and I'd hear all these horror stories, and I'm like, what am I doing here? What in the world? I said, this is not for me. This may be for a true 100% hardcore addict, but this is not for me. I just have a little problem with, some opiates. I get a little bit carried away. I pawn everything. Our utilities are getting cut off. Our kids are not getting fed. The dog just died. The wife is leaving me. I can't hold a job, but I'm not a hardcore addict, you know. So despite all these signs and symptoms that I could see, I'm not a hardcore addict. So I don't need to be here. So I think I stayed like 64 days, and I wasn't even on phase 2 of the program. And of course, I wasn't court ordered, so they couldn't, make me stay. So, I went to the gentleman over the house one day, and I said, I want to go home. And I remember him looking at me. I will never forget this. He looks at me. He goes, "What home?" I go, "Home with my wife and kids." He goes, "I'm going to rephrase my question. What home?" He said, "Buddy, you ain't got that." He said, you don't have that." He said, "Can you not see that? You don't have that." He said, "What you got is what's in front of you." And I said, "Sir," I said, "me and my wife have talked, and she told me if I do this, this, and this, everything's going to be fine." So, I mean, he couldn't hold me. So after countless times of him trying to talk me into staying, I signed out, went home. She allowed me to come back. She did allow me to come back in a home. And it lasted less than 3 months. I was off and running again. I was going to a doctor that I had really bull crapped good enough that I was getting anything and everything I needed when I needed it. And so the marriage ended up going south. She put me out. It was over with. I had ruined everything that I came in contact with. I was ruining her life. Uh, 2 innocent kids, I was ruining their lives. Um, that the her family came to the point where they couldn't even stand for me to be in the yard. You know, um, it got to the point they didn't even want to see me at Christmas or Thanksgiving, anything. Nobody wanted me around because of my actions and because of the way that I was doing this innocent family, these innocent kids that counted on me to be their dad. And every time you turned around, I was letting them down. Every time that there was a school function or something, I was letting them down. And when they were having to go and stay at relatives or friends' houses because the power got cut off, or the water, or the gas, or there was no food in the house. And I'm sitting there on the couch with 15 days without a bath or shaving, you know, but I still didn't have a problem. All these people were idiots. I didn't have a problem. And so that marriage ended up going just extremely bad. Um, and so I think the hardest part is when you hurt two people, two kids that adore you and they look up to you, and they are putting that they're saying, "I'm so glad you're in my life and that you're my new dad." And then you know there would be days when there wouldn't even be food in the house.
So they went without eating. It's okay. Take your time.
Yeah, they would there would be days when there wouldn't even be a breadcrumb in the house. And every time I could con somebody out of 20 or 30 bucks with the story, I needed to buy food, which was the truth, but I would take that money, maybe buy a loaf of bread, maybe, but you would take the rest and put up your nose or down your throat, you know, and then you look over there and you see two kids that are totally innocent of the whole deal. And you see that look on their face like, why does everybody else have this, and this, and we don't? You know,
Yeah.
and, but I was still at that point that I really and honestly still thought that I don't have a problem, guys. Here's the thing: I can quit anytime I want to. I don't have to do this anymore. I can quit anytime I want to. But then why don't you? Well, I will. I'll prove it to you. I'll do it. Nothing. Nothing. And so I kind of after we divorced, I kind of really really went downhill. I got into a very depressed mode. Um, and among this time that we divorced, my mother passed away. Um, a few months after we had gotten divorced, my mom passed away, and so I got in this really deep, dark place, this really hole that I was grieving about my mom. I was depressed about my marriage going south. I was depressed about why is it all this going wrong. And I look over here at these people I know, friends I know that are their life is just flourishing and all this, and mine's going to crap every time I turn around. Why is all this happening? Why is my health starting to fail? Because about this time, my health started failing because of the addiction. Uh, uh, I was when I got in this depressed mode, I'd done a lot of depressed eating. I went from weighing like 200 pounds to up to almost 400. Like
Wow.
in
Wow.
a, I was just like, just constantly. Every time the elbow bend, the mouth flew open. It was just constant. I go to KFC, I get a bucket of chicken, a meal big enough for a family of four. Okay. And I'm the only one at the house. So now do the math. I bring that meal home, and you would think, well, there ought to be enough there for me to have a couple of days. By that evening, gone, everything. And then I would go to the grocery store and I would buy all this junk food, and I was just eating constantly. I was smoking 3 and 4 packs of cigarettes a day. I was, uh, you know,
Well,
drinking.
that's why there's Overeaters Anonymous. A lot of us addicts. I'm writing a book for us, the group, and in the book I talk about switching addictions. It's one of the things we do. We just go from one thing to the other, and it's just the other thing's legal. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
And
Yeah,
accepted.
that's the biggest thing. You never heard of a somebody getting possession of tacos, or possession of a bucket of chicken with paraphernalia. You never heard of that. So because trust me, that was illegal. I'd have been the El Chapo of the food world. I put it that way, because I was trafficking some food, and like I said, I got up to almost 400 pounds. I had a heart attack uh, in my early 30s. I want to say I was 35, somewhere around there, 36 maybe. I had a massive heart attack, and uh, then about 4 years after that, I had a stroke, and all of this was due from my lifestyle, the weight gain. I was only 5'9", so you know I put on a massive amount of weight. My eating habits, with all the fat content I was taking in, was blocking arteries in my heart, and the extra weight. Um, my health started failing, and along with your health failing, you get sympathetic doctors that say, "Oh, this guy's in a lot of pain." You know, so with the failing health came the sympathetic doctors that came even more scripts that started, you know, started making me feel a little, quote unquote, better. My depression seemed like it got a little better. I was starting to deal with things a little better. Our life was getting a little, little better for me. And so things started looking up a little bit after I got out of the hospital with having my stroke. Um,
So you had a stroke and a heart attack.
well, I had a heart attack, and then about a year and a half, 2 years later, I had a stroke, and it was all due to the fact of my lifestyle, the the overweight, the eating, the the addiction to the pain medication, opiates, drinking. The drinking problem caused my muscle in my heart to weaken. Congestive heart failure is what they call it, and it gave me also chronic pancreatitis, which is a very painful condition. And all this stemmed from two things: fat and the food I was eating, the carbohydrate, or cholesterol, that's what I'm looking for, in my blood system, and two, the alcohol was killing my heart muscle and my pancreas and liver at the same time. So all this culminated into a heart attack, then a stroke, which when I had the stroke, I ended up having to go to a inpatient physical therapy rehabilitation facility, because I couldn't walk. I lost a use of the left side of my and so I gained all that back. I stayed in there a couple months. I really worked hard, um, and this is where I gained an epiphany. Wait a minute. They're giving me one of my pain pills every 6 to 8 hours. There it is. That's all I got to do at home. Just take one every 6 to 8 hours. I'm fine. It don't cause me any problem. That's when I had this epiphany while I'm laying on my back, you know, trying to regain the use of my uh, left side of my body. This light switch. Wait a minute. Oh, that's all I got to do at home. People, that's all I got to do. I just take it like it says on the bottle. I'm fine. That's all I got to do. So I get out. I'm saying this is what I'm gonna do. I'm feeling great. I lost a little bit of weight. I haven't drank in a while, so my taste buds has come back. I'm everything is looking up. My head's a little clearer, and so I'm gonna start from this day forward. It says one every 6 to 8 hours. By God, that's what I'm gonna do. One every 6 to 8 hours. That lasted about 2 days. And it was back off again, running again. And this pattern continued. Um, and, then came that day, and I don't mean to be jumping around here. I'm just trying to keep everything
No,
in order.
you're doing fine. Keep it up.
But, the day came, uh, I was already 46 years old. I was already 46. Uh, I was already remarried, you know, uh, and which by the grace of God and the program of recovery, I'm still married. We're still together. And but came that day when sitting in a parking lot of a convenience store, the very first time that I was ever introduced to intravenous drug use. Very first time. Um, I remember, I just bought some stuff from this guy, and he said, "Look, man," he said, you wasting your time, you wasting your money." He said, "This the way you're doing it, man. You're not getting your money's worth." So I said, "Well, man, I don't know anything about like putting a needle in a vein or anything like that. I didn't know anything about all that." And he said, "Hey, you want me to do it?" I said, "Man, I don't know." I said, You know, But yeah, I'll try this one time. But if I don't like it, I'm not doing it again. And here's the key phrase in that: if I don't like it, I won't do it again. Okay. So at this point, at that very time, it was 8:24 p.m. on a November 4th when at pump number 3 at a Marathon gas station on the Bessemer Super Highway, he sticks his needle in a vein. And at that moment, the dragon entered my life. That movie, Enter the Dragon, this is my Enter the Dragon moment. That dragon entered my life at that particular moment. I will never, as long as I'm drawing breath, I won't forget that moment at 8:24 p.m. on November 4th. I will never forget it because I remember the warm feeling hit my head. And I remember, oh my God, dude, you're right. And so for the next 4 years, um, I'm chasing that dragon. I'm looking for that feeling I got that very first time. It's not there. I look for it. I look for it. Once again, old patterns come back. Uh, I became emotionally and physically abusive again in my relationship, simply because I was not, and I'm not using by no means, and I've told counselors this and other people, I'm not using the drugs as an excuse. I'm not I'm not trying to give me a mulligan for being a total a-hole. I'm not trying to do that. But what I'm saying is this: I was a different, entirely different person. My personality, my demeanor, everything, entirely different person. I would, when I didn't have anything, I was emotionally very, very abusive to anybody around me. And I'm not talking about just my spouse, anybody that was around me. I was very abusive. Um, because of my addiction, my wife and I, in 1 year, lived in 26 different places in 1 year.
Wow.
20, simply because something about when you don't pay rent that people just get awfully sore about. They really get just mad at you
You gotta pay
when
your rent.
when you you know, pay your rent. Something about people just really don't like it.
Uh,
And, 26 different places. I've got my wife and dragging her 26 different places because oh, I tell you what, man, if give me next week and I'll get you your money. And a lot of times I would get the money. I was somehow or another I would get the money. I didn't have the money for rent. That wasn't a problem. But somehow or another, it never made it from my hands to the landlord's hands. Something kind of happened to it in between there. Never made it. So 26 different places, 5 different vehicles. You know, I would get a vehicle, one of these. I save up a little bit, go one of these little buy here, pay here places, get a vehicle, and then I run this scheme, and I'd end up selling it. You know, to one of these. There were a lot of places, especially in the area that we live, that they would buy a vehicle without a title for junk. So they give you 200 or 300 bucks for it and just junk it. They get what they call a junk title and junk it. So I was doing that constantly. Um, and one time I got a really good deal on a nice, very nice Dodge customized van. It was very nice. The people are taking very good care of it. Gave me one heck of a deal on it. Kept it about 2 months. Bingo. Sold it again. Done the same scheme again. So 26 places, 5 different vehicles, several different jobs. You know, um, and then I had always heard of people ODing. I'd heard that before, but I had never seen anybody OD. I had never been around anybody that OD'd. Uh, and then the day came when I woke up in an emergency room. I didn't know why I was in this emergency room. And I had these tubes down my nose and 2 or 3 IVs going. You know, I had OD'd. I didn't know anything about that. I knew it took place, but that was my first time ever experiencing. And I was 48, 48 years old. And I remember the doctor looking at me. He said, "Look," he said, "I'm looking at your medical records here, things that's happened to you in the past." And he said, "You don't know how close you came." He said, "You were legally dead when you got here." He said, "You had no pulse, you had no respiration." He said, "It's only by the grace of God that you came back." He said, "All of a sudden you took a deep breath in, your heart started beating." And I said, "Oh, wow." I said, "That's so scary." I said, "I'll never do that again. I'll never do that again." So I figured if I went back to snorting instead of shooting, I'd be safe. But I didn't want to OD again. Well, to make a really, really long story short, um, I ended up ODing uh, on my 50th birthday. 49th, I'm sorry, my 49th birthday, I'm sorry. and I come to an emergency room, and I literally woke up with a toe tag on my toe. That's how, yeah. My lips were blue. I was dead. By all intents and purposes, I was dead. And they had already put a toe tag on my toe. And I came to, and I remember I scared the poor nurse to death that was in the room because I just sit, I sit up like, what, what's going on? Scared her to death, bless her heart. And it was at that moment that I know you've probably, everybody's heard those scenarios, your life passed before your eyes, you know, I'd heard it a million times. But literally, in that few moments, I seen from the day I ever took my first drug to that moment and everything that happened in between the marriage, the failed marriage, the hurt children that I'd hurt, the families I'd hurt, the people I'd hurt that I had stole from. I had stole from friends, I had stole from family. I literally went in friends of mine's wallets and stole money. You know, all this, you know, came to me at this moment. And I remember looking at that doctor and I said, I said, I can't do this anymore. I said, I've been on this road for 20 something years and I can't do it anymore. And he said, well, they said, do you want help? Is that what you're asking? I said, I got to do something. I said, I'm getting older. I said, I'm going to be turning 50. And I said, I just can't keep beating my head up against this brick wall that I was beating my head up against. So I went to detox. I went to a medical detox, which just so happens in that hospital I was at, they had a detox unit. And I went in there for 3 days. And on the fourth day, I got on a Greyhound bus and went to a wonderful facility in South Georgia. Um, I don't know if I can I mention the name? Is it okay to of the facility? Turning
Yeah.
Point. Turning Point in Moultrie, Georgia. I went there. Uh, and by this time, I had realized that yes, I am an addict. Yes, I do have a problem. So I was willing. I became willing to listen and follow suggestions. So I stayed for 21 days in this residential program, and then I went to an intensive outpatient program for 6 months, where I stayed away from my wife. I stayed away from everything that I knew for 6 months. Um, but basically, that 6 months saved my life because I learned how to live. I learned how to live without drugs and alcohol. I learned how to live without being high. I learned how to live life on life's terms. That was my number one issue, is living life on life's terms. Not my terms, life's terms. And so in this 6 months, I learned that it's not always going to be my way, that it's going to be uh, pain and suffering, that everyone goes through pain and suffering at some point in their life. So I learned to live life on life's terms. I learned the biggest thing I learned was to like me. The turning point of my whole addiction was today I could look in the mirror and say, you're good enough just the way you are. I like me. I love me. It was at that moment when I was able to look in the mirror and accept me for me that I started the recovery process. Because up until then it was just fake. Everything I was doing was just for show. to make this person happy, to get this person off my back, yada, yada, yada. But the one person I wasn't making happy was me. The one person I wasn't doing anything about was me. So all those other times I was fighting to make everybody else happy, but I wasn't doing a thing to change me, to do something for the one person I could do something about, the person looking in the mirror. I wasn't doing anything for that person. So on this January morning, when I stood in front of this mirror and I realized I love this guy, I really do. I remember I went to group that morning, and it was so ironic. One of the first things our group counselor asked that morning, he said, I want each one of you guys to think of one thing and give me the answer at the end of group. I want you to think of the one person that's here in this program that you want to like you the most. I want you to name that one person. And I thought, man, is that not a kicking ahead? And so at the end of the group, we had a 3 hour day group, and about 2.5 hours in, he said, okay, I want everybody to, give me the name of the person. And so everybody went around and said, well, I want so and so to like me. And this other guy said, well, I want, this person to like me, or I want you to like me, counselor, or whatever. And he got around to me and he said, now, you. I said, the one person I want to like me more than anybody, me. And I won't never forget, he looked at everybody. He said, that's the answer I've been looking for 25 minutes. He said, everybody give me everybody else. And it was at that moment that it's like a fog lifted. It's like all this cloudiness that had been clouding my thinking, my emotions, my physical being, my mental being, and all that lifted. I realized that the whole time, drugs wasn't the problem. Drugs were the solution to a problem that I had never dealt with. So I started digging in my subconscious and all this, and I realized that all the stuff that I had talked to you earlier about from my childhood, from the events that happened when I was 10 years old, to my controlling mother, to the bullying and all that, when I was high using, I didn't think about all that. So therefore, I didn't deal with it. So therefore, it festered. So therefore, it just kept building and kept building because I never dealt with it. So when that clarity that I was able to like me, and I was able to accept me for me, and able to self life on life terms, when I was able to do that, the real recovery process for me, now I'm speaking for me, okay, it began for me. And I looked back on all the failed attempts at recovery in the past, and it was for the fact that I was doing it for everybody else. I wasn't doing it for me. I was doing it for everybody but me.
That's an absolutely extremely important thing, and I was the same way until I learned. Excuse me. When I first went to rehab, I was like, I'm doing it for this person, I'm doing it for that person.
Right.
And then when I was in rehab, it kind of hit me. I need to do this for myself, because if I'm not the best person I could be, I can't be the best person to anyone else.
Absolutely.
So tell us about life not nowadays for you.
Well, to sit here and say every day is great, I'd be lying. I have good days. I have bad days. I have some effects from my health issues that I had earlier in life. I have some coronary artery disease now that I have to deal with on a daily basis. Um, but here's the thing: life is good, even on bad days. Life is good. Um, I I take things 1 minute at a time, 1 second at a time. Um, I I'm in currently. I've started my second year of studying psychology. I'm going after my bachelor's in psychology with the hopes of being a drug and alcohol counselor. Um, so
That's
I'm
great.
starting. I'm starting my second year. I just made the dean's list. I don't know how I pulled that off, but I did. So
Congratulations.
thank you. Um, my relationship with my wife, it's better than it has been. Um, I have mended, some fences and some, there are, as the steps tell us that there's some amends that just can't be made. And, but I have mended a lot of fences with some family and some friends. There's still people that if they see me coming, they will go the opposite direction. And hey, that's okay. That's okay. I mean, um, I take life on its terms. Um, and all in all, in short, life is good. I have my bad days, but now I can deal with those bad days. Now I can, when an issue comes up, I can deal with it in a healthy way. I don't have to turn to a drug, a pill, or a powder or a drink to deal with it.
Any tips or tricks for our listeners or our viewers?
The biggest thing that I tell people, I sponsored a guy here recently. The biggest thing that I tell people is just what I've said several times is you have to take life as it comes with the cards that you dealt with. Um, we can't. The only person that we can fix is a person in the mirror. We can't fix nobody else. You can't fix your friends. You can't fix your family. You can't fix the way people think about you. You can fix what you think about yourself. That's the biggest thing. You can fix yourself, nobody else. So it's like I told my sponsor, I said, concentrate on you, do you, stay in your lane, fix you, work on you, because that's the only person at the end of the day that you can fix. You can wish, well, I wish, so and so would do this, or I wish so and so would do that. That's fine. You can wish that all day. But the only person that you can do anything about is that person you see in the mornings when you look in the mirror. Concentrate and do you. That's the one thing that I tell, uh, especially newcomers and stuff that has come up and, talk to me before, you know, I just tell them, do you, fix you, work on you, and everything else falls into play. But you can't fix anybody else. You can't fix a situation. You can just do you. And that's the biggest piece of advice I give anybody. Do you. Fix you. Work the program. Work recovery. And it works. You get into anything, you get out what you put in. That's anything in life. You know, um, work the program in order and do you and everything. And everything's not going to be a bed of roses. It's not going to be. Every day's not going to be good. Every day's not going to be unicorns and rainbows. It's not going to be that. There's going to be a lot of cloudy, rainy, sucky days. But here's the thing: when those days come, you deal with it. You take what you learn in recovery and you deal with it. You deal with it in a healthy way. You don't have to run and hide anymore. You don't have to get under a blanket of addiction to hide from it anymore. you take it as it comes. You take life every day as it comes, and you take it at that moment. The main thing is mindfulness, being in the moment, because what you have is only what you see at that moment. That's what you have. Anything past that, we're not guaranteed that we're going to be alive 5 minutes from now. I could hang up this call and drop dead when I walk in my living room. God, I hope not. But we're not guaranteed anything. So all you have is that moment that you're in at that particular time. And that's Jim, that's about all I could really say. I'm not I'm a lot like Forrest Gump. I'm not a smart man. Um, so I'm pretty simple. But I'm very passionate about recovery. I'm very passionate about um, addiction, because something that I thought was not real, that only happened to some, almost took me out. And I learned one big important thing about addiction. Addiction is very, very, uh, it don't discriminate. Addiction does not discriminate. It doesn't care if you're rich or poor, doesn't care what color your skin is, doesn't care what religion you come from. It don't care who your father is. It doesn't care anything about a person, period. It is open to anyone. It does not discriminate. And all those years that I thought that drug addiction was only for those people, like I said earlier, that lives under a bridge or in their car or in the woods, I became that guy. I became the one that lived in a vehicle. I became the one that had to sleep under a couple of hospital blankets in the woods. I became that person. And so it didn't care anything about me personally or what I had or didn't have. Drug addiction itself does not discriminate. And that's one of the biggest lessons that I learned. And I'm very grateful for my recovery. Any chance I have to, like today, was, you don't know what a blessing this has been. This has been an absolute blessing. And I thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, because
I,
I'm very passionate about recovery. And any chance I have to talk about recovery, I do, because it's something near and dear to my heart. And I read a stat the other day where 19.5 million people in the United States, one in every six, suffer from some form of addiction. And so it's very near and dear to my heart. And and it's people like you that are doing this, is putting this effort out that you do with this podcast, that I'm grateful for, that are there to give us a voice, because so many times addicts are swept under the rug. That voice does not matter because of the past. People will look at me and say, well, he was this, he was that, he'd done this, he'd done that, so it's like I don't matter. And so, but it's people like you that are going out and saying we do have a voice and we do matter. And I'm so grateful for this. And I'm so grateful for what you do, because this is something that is so, that I'm so grateful for. It would take me all day to get that out.
I really, really appreciate your kind words. They mean a lot. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do. Not to sound, like I'm patting myself in the back, but I want to give everybody a voice. So that's why, during the interview, I try to just let you guys tell your story, get it out there. And the one thing I hear from almost all addicts, and I think you said it was, I hope this just helps somebody. That's the reason for doing it. And
Yes. I hope that, you know, um, if I become a counselor, which I'm hoping and praying happens if I can help just one person, and if what I said today might help one person, then that's a blessing. And just me being able to tell my story though, it's going to help me. It helps me more than it does anybody. It
Yep,
really does.
yep,
You know.
yep, yep. All right, so I think that's a good place to wrap it up. I just want to say thank you again. And for all our listeners and viewers, click below and subscribe. Also give us a like if you saw it, if you like what you saw here today. Also check out our Facebook group. There you'll see under the events tab, we've got a ton of Zoom meetings that we do. Everyone's always welcome and they're open meetings. We also have a Facebook page, so if you can go and give us a like there, it really helps us as well. And also, obviously, we have this podcast that we do weekly where we continue to interview recovering addicts. So check these out. And thank you for listening. And until next time.